Hey there guys, we're taking a look at Battlefield 5 running on the AMD Ryzen 5 5500U. Now we're taking a look at this running at 1080p with the lowest in-game graphics settings at the stock 15-watt TDP, and this is running on the 22.7.1 beta drivers. Now these were supposed to come with improvements to DirectX 11. It's not completely across the board, and there's even some games that have regressions. These are beta drivers. I think that needs to be very emphasized here because there is a lot of beta aspects of them in that there were performance regressions in a lot of games. I was hoping to see some improvement in Battlefield 5 because it has always been a very difficult game to run on this specific chip, and I was hoping that we could maybe at least get somewhere in the 30 to 40 FPS range. But as you can see here at the full 1080p resolution, that's just not going to be doable, though I don't think anyone was really expecting this to do that well at the full 1080p resolution. So in general, I would consider this to be super rough to even remotely play. It's very brutal and honestly was not an enjoyable experience. So of course, we can always raise the TDP up to 25 watts to see if that can actually level out the performance here. And that really just was not the case here. The full 25 watt TDP on here was just not giving us anywhere near a decent level of performance. It overall was just really rough to play. Those 1% lows are just so brutal, and 22 FPS average is just laughably bad. In general, this is just not going to be doable for pretty much anyone, and I would really be surprised if anyone could stomach playing like this. In general, just this game was super difficult to get through. Just trying to find a playable setting for it was going to be pretty rough. So I was just testing out a variety of different TDP settings. And the 30 watt TDP was not enough to save the overall gaming experience here, where the averages are starting to get close to 30, but it's those 1% lows being even below 20 that just makes everything feel so heavy and rough to even remotely play. Trying to aim like this is so unbelievably difficult, it's actually insane. You're pretty much playing a PowerPoint presentation here. It's just not going to be a doable experience. Like, if this was a single player game and you were just really desperate to play this, maybe. But for the multiplayer, this is just way too rough, way too unenjoyable. It is overall a really bad experience. Those 1% lows are just really dragging everything down. If our 1% lows were within a FPS or two of the averages, maybe this would be doable. But as it stands, it's really just not. Aiming at anyone is just going to be so difficult to do because it's just way too low of an FPS for it. So of course, another option that we have is dropping the resolution down to 900p, and you can see it running here at 900p with the 15 watt TDP. So we're back to the stock TDP, seeing if that can improve the overall experience like that. Unfortunately, it's just not. Our 1% lows are still at a brutal range, and our averages are still just going to be completely unplayable. So overall, the stock 15 watt TDP, even at 900p, is not going to be doable. Once we raise the TDP up to 25 watts though, that's when we finally start to see some pretty decent averages, in the sense that the averages now look incredible in comparison to where we were at before, since we're now hitting the 30 FPS range. But our 1% lows are still falling below 20. So overall, those FPS averages don't really mean anything if our 1% lows are going to be that bad, and our frame times are just going to continue to spike up like crazy like this. So in general, not really a win whatsoever, but we are starting to get into ranges that maybe this could become playable at. Of course, it could always just turn out to be wishful thinking, since this game does seem to be extremely heavy for this chip to actually run. And the 30 watt TDP pretty much just ends up being an unplayable experience just as before, where our averages are at least now above 20, but not by a significant margin, and our averages being in the low to mid 30s is not going to do anything for us if our 1% lows are that bad and the frame times just continue to spike erratically as they're doing right now. In general, again, very difficult to aim at anything. It really is just not getting into a playable territory. I was hoping that at this point we would at least get something, considering the amount of heat that we're generating here. I mean, the chip is literally just a couple of degrees away from just starting to thermal throttle. So in general, not only is it not playing well, it is getting into temperature territory where you're just going to start to regress in terms of performance anyway. So if we drop down to 720p to see if we can actually salvage this game, you'll see that the overall experience that we're getting here is just as bad as all the other settings. It's just not going to be doable. And so far playing through the game, I was having an absolutely terrible time. It was just not going to be doable to do anything. Aiming was so difficult because the frame times were just spiking up and down. So you never had any consistent smooth feeling while trying to do anything. It's just really, really rough. And in general, I think that most people are going to just end up having such a frustrating time trying to play like this that they would realistically just end up doing literally anything else. And the 25-watt TDP does absolutely nothing, even at 720p, where we're still not getting our 1% lows above the 20 FPS range by any significant margin, and our averages aren't even seeing any noticeable gains either. The frame times are just still all over the place, and in general, it's not a fun or enjoyable experience at all to try to play like this. You're overall going to find that the game's performance is just going to be a detriment to you trying to do literally anything of value for your team here. I mean, the frame times in particular are just spiking up like crazy, and you can see how big the fluctuations in terms of the overall milliseconds here can be. You'll have just random spikes that go up 20 milliseconds. So it's just one of those things where overall very, very rough to try to play. It's just not going to be doable here. Even Battlefield 1 performed significantly better than this, especially once we finally got down to 720p. And not even a full 30 watts of TDP pumping through here was enough to salvage the experience here, where overall the experience is just so brutal in absolutely every game mode, every map. It's just super rough to even try to play this, and it's overall going to lead you to have a very, very frustrated experience trying to play the game. In general, I think most people are not going to be very happy to try to play the game like this. So really, it seems like the new drivers and the DirectX 11 fixes that it comes with do not seem to affect this game whatsoever. But my God, look at the temperatures that we're reaching here. It is absolutely brutal. You'll see that the GPU is actually downclocking itself at this point because it's just cooking alive. So this game is extremely demanding on both the CPU and GPU to the point where it actually starts thermal throttling at this point. So at least these numbers are just not going to be relevant to you whatsoever, because of the fact that if you're on a system that could actually handle this TDP, you might actually get better performance. But knowing how this game actually behaves, it's probably not going to be anything substantial. So in general, I would say that this game is just not playable on this chip. It's really just an absolutely terrible experience. And if you really just want to play a Battlefield game, go play Battlefield 4 or go play Battlefield 1, because this really is just not going to be a good experience. So I'm extremely disappointed by that. I was really hoping to see more of an uplift, but at least as it stands with these beta drivers, there are just a lot of games where there's no improvements, and I think that that's just going to be across the board. Even with the full release, I don't expect it to actually help a lot of games, but there are going to be some key games that actually do see some improvements, and in particular the OpenGL improvements are pretty welcome, because OpenGL was in a worse state than DirectX 11 by a significant margin. So for the Battlefield fans out there, this is not going to be the patch that saves this game for you, but if you're a Battlefield fan, you're probably just too busy being extremely sad over the state of the franchise in general to really care too much about this. But anyways, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.